The Challenger Space Shuttle event was, unfortunately, one of the most heartbreaking events in American history. Um, of course, the Challenger was when they sent up a teacher with 7 astronauts. Krista McAuliffe was to be the first civilian in space, but about 72 seconds after takeoff, the Challenger exploded. The thing that makes this particular event perhaps so difficult to swallow or to accept is that um, after the investigation into the event, it seemed pretty obvious that it could have been fairly easily prevented. At the time of the launch, NASA had already had to delay the the launch a couple different times, and were desperate to have the Challenger launch successfully. Um, as a result, they prioritized success over safety rather than safety over success, and by doing so, they ended up failing on both accounts. Um, there was not sufficient data on what would happen to the the O-rings in the primary booster, the O-rings which kept um, fuel from running loose through the engines, what would happen to them at low temperatures. Um, However, rather than put a pause on the launch, rather than delay it another time and um, attempt to gather data on what the possible implications could be, NASA managers, the project managers, decided instead um, that if there was no sufficient data, then that meant there was no reason to delay the launch without sufficient data or without data indicating that it would be problematic. That must mean that there wasn't enough, I suppose you could say, reasonable doubt. Um, and so they decided to go ahead and go forward with the launch. Um, the fact that there were concerns from the engineers about what would happen because of low temperatures should have been enough for the project managers to delay the launch, even if it meant delaying it for a third or fourth time. There was an engineer by the name of Roger Beaujolais who warned against launching the shuttle, who warned that there was insufficient data, that there were indications that low temperatures would be a safety concern. Unfortunately, he was overridden by the project managers. It's difficult to say um, if there's anything he could have done differently or could have done better. It's hard to make that call not being in his position. But I would argue that he did the best he could with what he had. One of the biggest issues was that the project managers could override the engineers. In my personal opinion, in a project such as sending a space shuttle up into space, the project managers should always be required to defer to the judgment of the engineers when it comes to safety concerns. One of the problems, unfortunately, was that some of the project managers also had experience as engineers and still authorized the launch. There was also a major lack of miscommunication. There were several times in the setup for the launch in which safety limitations had to be waived by personnel. Unfortunately, the personnel who were responsible for waiving these safety limitations had not been briefed about the conference the night before and were not aware of the possible safety issues. And of course, this combination of miscommunication and success over safety led to the tragedy. Engineers have a very specialized set of skills and knowledge, and as a result, the safety of civilians should always override loyalty to a company. If it comes down to a decision between selling out the company and saving human lives or protecting a company and risking human lives, the correct answer should always be the former. With their specialized knowledge, engineers have a responsibility to protect those who don't have the same knowledge as them in any way possible.